Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to state the x and y intercepts of a graph. But before we do that, let's review a couple of things about points in a plane. So remember, this is your first quadrant, second quadrant, third, fourth. So you go counterclockwise. So remember the x and y axis, your y-axis, your x-axis, divides a coordinate plane into four quadrants, 1, 2, 3, 4. And when plotting points and labeling points, you always store the origin. So if we look at this point right here, so let's say I want to look at this point. And go ahead and enlarge this. So if we look at that point, and I want to label it, so remember labeling points, your first coordinate is the x-coordinate, your second coordinate is the y-coordinate. And so when I label that point, I'm going to start the origin, I'm going to go to the right 6 units, so that means the x-coordinate is 6, and I'm going to go up 8 units, so my y-coordinate is 8. So that point is stated as 6, 8, so those are your coordinates. That's your ordered pair. So if we look at a point that's, let's say, in a second quadrant, and so suppose I want to look at this point here, I want to label that point, so I want to find out what the x-coordinate, what the y-coordinate is. Again, you store the origin. And this time I'm going to go to the left, and let's see, that's -7 right here. That's -6, -7, -8. So -7, so I'm going to go to the left -7, so that means that my x-coordinate is -7. And I'm going to go up +10. So remember, when you go right, it's positive, go left, it's negative, and you can even look at your axes. These are positive numbers, these are negative numbers. When you go up, positive, you go down, negative. And if you look at a point, let's say that's in the third quadrant, so let's say I want to look at this one right here. So again, I'm going to start the origin. I'm going to go to the left, so this is -12. So my x-coordinate is -12, and then my y-coordinate is -3. Now, I want you to notice something about a point that's on the axis. So let's say we're looking at this point right here. And so if I want to label that point just like I did these other three, you're going to start the origin. Now this time, remember, if you look at it, your point that you're interested in is right above it. So you're not going right or left. You're not moving at all, right or left. That means that my x-coordinate is 0. But I do need to go up 4 units, so my y-coordinate is +4. So again, if you look at this one, your x-coordinate is 0. You're not moving left or right. The point that you're interested in is right above the origin. And then my y-coordinate is 12. So if you look at, let's say, this one, again, your x-coordinate, since I'm starting the origin, I'm going straight down. I'm not going right or left. I'm not moving at all. That's 0 for your x-coordinate. But I'm going down to -10, so that's -10 is your y-coordinate. So again, you can keep doing this. And over here, that's going to be 0, and then that's a -15. What I want you to notice is that when you're looking at a point that's on the y-axis, this is your y-axis right here. If you look at a point that's on the y-axis, I want you to notice that all these points, no matter what point you're looking at, all these points right here, all these points will have an x-coordinate of 0. Okay? If you're in a quadrant, quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, or quadrant 4, notice that none of these coordinates are zeros. Only on the y-axis is your x-coordinate 0. And let's look, I'm sorry, only the y-axis, excuse me. Only the y-axis is your x-coordinate 0. Now let's look at the x-axis. Let's see what happens there. So if I'm on the x-axis, let's say I'm looking at this point here. Now notice you start the origin. This time I'm going to the right 4 units, so that means my x-coordinate is 4, but I'm not going up or down. I'm staying on the x-axis. So since I'm not moving up or down, my y-coordinate is 0. If I look at this point here, same thing. I start the origin, I go to the right 12, and I'm not moving up or down. I'm staying there, so that means that my y-coordinate is 0. If I look at this point here, so I go to the left 8, so that's -8 for my x-coordinate. Since I'm not going up or down, my y-coordinate is 0. So I want you to notice, just like our discussion about the y about a point that's on the y-axis. Let's talk about a point that's on the x-axis. Notice that no matter what point you look at that is on the x-axis, no matter what point that's on the x-axis, your y-coordinate is always 0. Okay? All right, now, that's going to take us to a couple of definitions. So this was a quick review about plotting points and labeling points. So let's talk, since we are interested in stating the x and y intercepts of a graph, let's talk about definitions about what an intercept is. Okay, so an x-intercept. An x-intercept is the point, just take the word interception, the point where the graph crosses the x-axis. The x-intercept is the point where the graph crosses the x-axis, and the y-intercept is the point where the graph crosses or touches the y-axis. So crosses or touches, crosses or touches. Okay? Now, going back to our discussion, so remember when we talk about the x and y intercepts, so we're interested in this idea. Where does the graph cross or touch the x-axis? Where does the graph cross or touch the y-axis? So if I'm looking at a graph, so remember all these right here, so this is my graph, and I'm just making this up. All these right here, all these points then would be called y-intercepts. These are your y-intercepts. So that's where the graph crosses or touches the y-axis. If I look at any point that's on the x-axis, so if I look at all these graphs, then these right here, where the graph crosses or touches the x-axis, those would be called x-intercepts. So those are your x-intercepts. Now notice that in the ones I've drawn, all these graphs here, those graphs cross the axes. Now when we talk about touching, what we mean by that is this. So it could do something like this. You could have a graph that, I'm going to go ahead and do it down here. You could have a graph that does something like this. And then all of a sudden, does this. So notice it didn't cross, this graph did not cross the y-axis, it touched it. So that would still be, this right here, would still be called a y-intercept. Okay, now that we know what we mean by crossing or touching, let's go back and review this right here. So wherever a graph, so again, if you look at your y-axis, I want you to notice that any point that's on the y-axis, the x-coordinate is 0. And any point that's on the x-axis, the y-coordinate is 0. It's easy to remember. Just plot a point and then label, and you'll see that if you're on the y-axis, your x-coordinate is going to be 0 because you're going straight up. When you're on the x-axis, your y-coordinate is 0 because you're going to the right or left, but you're not going up or down. So to find, so I want you to notice is that for every x-intercept, I want you to notice that the y-coordinate is 0. All right, so that's what we just said. So whenever you're on the x-axis, the y-coordinate is 0. And then for every y-intercept, the x-coordinate is 0. So remember, don't mess up and say, if I'm finding the y-intercept, the y-coordinate is 0. That's not true. Think about your plane and then think about a point that's on the y-axis. So if you have a point that's on the y-axis, you're not going right or left. So that means x is 0. You're going straight up. Okay? All right, now let's use this idea with these 4 problems. Okay, so for each graph, determine the x and y intercepts. And if there are no x or y intercepts, say so. I'm sorry, right here. For each graph, determine the x and y intercepts. And if there are no x or y intercepts, say so. So soon you're going to be graphing these quadratic functions. This will be a quadratic function. The graph is a parabola. And in this particular case, this parabola crosses the x-axis in two places. So that means there are two x-intercepts. There are two of them. And then the parabola crosses the y-axis in just one place, right here. Okay, so if I want to find the x-intercepts, there are a couple ways that you could be asked to do this. So one way is just to state what the x-intercepts are, meaning this. So here the graph crosses the x-axis. Remember, x-intercepts are the graph crosses the x-axis. So here the graph crosses the x-axis at 2, comma, let's list the other one. The other one is -3. So on MyMathLab, or unless specified otherwise, if you're just asked to find the x-intercepts, you just list them. What point, without putting an ordered pair, just list the point. Where does the graph cross the x-axis? And over here, if we're talking about the y-intercept, do the same thing. What's the value of the point, the y-coordinate, where the graph crosses the y-axis? Well, graph crosses the y-axis here at -6. So that's your y-intercept. Now, they could ask you to write this as an ordered pair. So as an ordered pair, and in MyMathLab, you're going to, they're not going to ask you to write as an ordered pair in MyMathLab. They're just going to ask you to list the points. So you're going to use commas to separate them. Here you need a comma because there's just one number. Okay, but as an ordered pair, you got to list an x and y coordinate. So over here, to do that, it's a good idea to label. So here, I went to the right 2 units, and remember your y coordinate is 0. So 2, 0. And then the other one is, I went to the, so that's going to be your x-intercepts. Your x-intercept. So here I went to the left 3 units, then go up and down, so that means your y coordinate is 0. So -3, 0. Your y-intercept, in this case, as an ordered pair, would be, so remember, you're going, start of the order, you're going straight down, so that means your x-coordinate is 0, and then your y-coordinate here is -6. All right, let's look at this one. So here, notice that this graph does not cross the y-axis, but it does cross the x-axis at one point, right here. So in terms of x-intercepts, there's only one, so you just list it. And let's assume, if you're not told, just assume that all these little tick marks is 1 unit. So 1, 2, 3, 4, -1, -2, -3, and so on. +1, +2, and so on. So this will be a +2. For the y-intercept, you're going to say none. Okay? As an ordered pair, so the x-intercept, so remember there's just one x-intercept, so you can list it as an ordered pair, so you can go to the right 2 units, and then your y-coordinate is 0. So that's 2, 0. And then for the y-intercept, again, you're going to say none. Okay, now let's look at this one. So here, and in this course, you are going to graph these types of equations as well. These are polynomial functions, and so you are going to graph these. Over here, though, notice it crosses the x-axis here, and it touches the x-axis here. For the y-intercept, so there are 2 x-intercepts. For the y-intercept, it only crosses the y-axis here. So this point is both an x, this point here, is both an x-intercept and a y-intercept. Okay, so let's list the x-intercepts. So again, there are 2 of them. So this one's a -3, so that's where it crosses the x-axis, comma, and this x-intercept here is 0. The y-intercept, there's only one, and that y-coordinate right here is 0. As an ordered pair, your x-intercepts, are going to be, so there'll be two of them. So this first ordered pair, this one here. So again, you store the origin, you go to the left, and that's -3, comma 0. And here, when we store the origin, since I'm not going right, left, or up or down, that means that my my point is 0, 0. That's your origin. So remember, 0, 0 is the origin. That's 0, 0. That's the origin. So that's where your point's located, the origin. Okay, your y-intercept as an ordered pair. Your y-intercept as an ordered pair, there's only one. Again, this point is the same as the x-intercept. So as an ordered pair, the y-intercept, remember that's your point. So you're not going right, left, so that's 0. You're not going up or down, so that's 0. So notice that that one of your x-intercepts and the y-intercept are the same point. So this point is both an x-intercept and a y-intercept, the origin. Okay, now you are going to also graph circles in this course. So let's look at this. So this right here has no relevance to this problem, but at some point you are going to talk about the center and the radius of a circle. But for this particular situation, this information is not needed. But the center, remember the center is the center of the circle, and the radius would be the distance from the center to a point on a circle. So in each of these cases, the radius is 3 units long. That's what that means. But again, that has no bearing on our discussion here. We're only interested in x and y intercepts. So use the graph of the circle to answer the following. So which of the following is a true statement? Select all that apply. So there are no x-intercepts. That is true. The graph does not cross the x-axis, so I'm going to circle that one. There are no y-intercepts. That's not true, because you can see there that the graph does cross the y-axis. In fact, it crosses the y-axis 2 places. There are 2 x-intercepts? Nope, there aren't any. There are 2 y-intercepts? Yes, there are 2 y-intercepts. Okay, now we're here to the nearest 10th. So remember in the ones we just did, the intercepts intersected the x and y axis at a integer. So these were integers. Here we got to estimate this because it doesn't intersect at an integer. We got to estimate where those x-intercepts are. So the nearest 10th. So to the nearest 10th, which of the following could be the y-intercept as an ordered pair? Select all that apply. So let's look at this one here. So what I would do first is label that point and then find out which one is listed here. So remember, this is the origin right here. That's the origin. And that's where you start, right here. That's the origin, and that's where you start. So since I'm not going right, left, I'm going straight down. That means that my x-coordinate is 0. And then I'm going down, so let's estimate this to be a -2.8. And so the one that's going to work for this case is going to be this one. So that's going to be this x-intercept. Over here, this one. So again, I start the origin. Since I'm not going right or left, that means that my x-coordinate is 0. And since I'm going down, it'll be negative. And so that's a -7 point. See, this is -7, this is -8, close to -7. So let's say this one here is -7.2. And so that's it. So don't choose these, because remember, if the y-coordinate is 0, if your y-coordinate is 0, that's an x-intercept. If your x-coordinate is 0, that's a y-intercept. All right. And so that was a review of intercepts and plotting points. All right, so that's going to take care of this lesson.